Broadcasting from New Braunfels, Texas, home of the historic Green Hall and the best river tubing in America. You're listening to PX1 Sports Radio, where we cover the hottest topics in the sports gaming world and the world of sports entertainment. Here's your host, Mike Peters.
What is up, guys? It's episode number 5, and we are blowing through these. I see episode number 100 coming on the horizon. We have been away for a few weeks. I got sick, had a sinus infection, then I got the flu, then I went out of town, and that just completely took me out of my rhythm, and I apologize to you guys. We have been away for a little bit, but we are back, and we should be rocking and rolling on a regular schedule from here on out. We might have a missed episode here and there, but for the most part, I think you can depend on us to be live with a new episode every Friday, so definitely be sure to follow us and check that out. Today, we've got some interesting things to cover. MLB The Show had a broadcast yesterday where they uncovered some interesting new features as part of their presentation, and I want to talk about that and how it relates to Madden. And then I want to talk a little bit about the franchise mode in Madden, why it is where it is right now, and some of the things that maybe they can borrow from MLB The Show and maybe even NBA Live or NHL and kind of add it in to dress it up a little bit. So buckle in and grab your favorite snack and drink, and let's get to it. So the first thing that they talked about yesterday in MLB The Show was their show tracker, which was pretty cool. Basically what that is on replays and maybe even regular plays, they'll have a little thing that pops up and shows the show tracker. And, on a home run, it might show the distance and the velocity, or on a field or on making a great play, it might show how much distance he covered and stuff like that. I think that's kind of cool. I don't know that you can really put it in Madden per se, or even a whole lot of other sports games, honestly, just because baseball is one of those games that has breaks in between plays, and anybody that's a fan of baseball kind of understands that. So you can show replays and stuff like that, not really slow down the game as much, and you can add little stuff like that. I don't know if it's really going to be something that we're all really excited about it, but I think it is a creative way to take data that's probably already in the game, stuff that they already track anyway, to try to make sure that the game's realistic. Now they're just putting it in a graphical display to give users more info. I think that's pretty cool. The other thing that they did is they're introducing stadium tagging, which is a pretty cool feature in that now if you hit the ball into a certain area, mostly out of the ballpark in a home run or off the outfield fences or even in foul territory, they can now tag certain areas to be linked to certain lines of commentary. So if you hit it off of the Green Monster, it can say it was off the Green Monster. Or if you're in a stadium that's got an out-of-town scoreboard, it will say off the out-of-town scoreboard. Or, if you're in Wrigley or Fenway or whatever, and you have Waveland Avenue and Yawkey, I think is the one in Fenway. Sheffield is in outside of Wrigley also. So if you hit it out of the stadium, it will say, it landed on Waveland Avenue or whatever. So that's kind of cool. They're going to integrate that stuff, and it's going to improve the commentary a little bit more. And I think that's definitely something that's a benefit for MLB. Not sure that's something that can really be added to any other sports game, because you don't have that same dynamic where, you can hit a ball out of the stands. Maybe in NHL, if you broke the glass, which I haven't seen that in a long time. I don't even think that's possible anymore. Puck goes into the seats. Maybe they could use it. Madden, there's really not a whole lot you could do with it. Hey, they kicked it over the net and some fan in row 13 caught it. I don't know. I don't know if that adds a whole lot to it, but I think it's going to be interesting for the show, and will definitely improve the commentary aspect of it. They're also adding, and this was released a while back, but they're adding Harold Reynolds and Dan Plesac as a 2-man color commentary team to team up with Matt Vasgersian. So, it's going to be a little bit interesting. It's going to be a different dynamic now, and you're going to get more commentary. I think this is probably a move made in conjunction with not only NBA having multiple color analysts depending upon where your game is, and Madden having the dynamic commentary that updates every week. They're trying to go in that route. They're trying to give their fans more because they got to keep up with the Joneses. And, that kind of goes in line with, those who say that with only having one game per sport, whether it be baseball, basketball, football, whatever, that there's not competition. It's just not true. You're competing with all the other games that are out there. You're competing with NBA and Madden and NFL and FIFA and NHL. And, if they're doing something that you're not, people are going to expect it and they're going to complain about it. And, casual gamers that might only buy, 1 or 2 sports games a year, they might change which sports games they buy depending on some of these features. So it's not direct correlation, but there is competition out there, and it does push these developers to do new things. And we're seeing that. MLB also, I believe it was last week, they announced that they're going to have a feature that's a lot like Madden's Play the Moments, where basically you can jump into a franchise game at a designated point, a critical moment. I don't remember what they called it, but basically it's like Play the Moment in Madden, where you don't have to play a full game, and I think that's great. I mean, if you look back at the heyday of Madden, and I've talked about this before, but back in the 05-06 days, where they were selling 10 to 12 million copies a year, franchise mode was very in-depth. There was a ton of stuff in there, and it really gave people a thing to get engrossed in. And the sales have kind of dipped since the online gaming took off in 09 and 10. It's just the sales kind of gradually went down as they focused more online. And, now they're at a point where they're starting to realize that they got stagnated around 6.5, 7 million units every year. And now they're trying to get back up there. And I think all games can learn from that, and that franchise mode is a very, very important part of the gaming experience. Yes, online's probably as big as it's ever been. Modes like Mutt and Diamond Dynasty and stuff like that are as big as it's ever been, and they're definitely money-making opportunities for these game makers. However, if you don't give your fan base something other than playing online, then you're going to lose those fans occasionally, because not everybody wants to play the way people online. We saw last year in MLB, the bunt cheese, where everybody would just bunt over and over again, get fast guys and just bunt, and it was ridiculous. Obviously, those of you that are in Madden and see what you face if you play online there, it's the same few plays and formations over and over again, and it's annoying, and people get tired of it pretty easily. It takes, I think a pretty strong-willed, or maybe somebody that just doesn't care about competitive games and just wants to win. It takes a certain kind of mindset to put up with that. So I think franchise mode is the thing that people really need to focus on. And one of the things that I think is going to be a big addition to the franchise mode, and we'll find out more, I believe it's early next week, when they do the franchise deep dive on MLB The Show. But one of the things that's really cool and got some buzz on Twitter, I tweeted about it yesterday, was there's going to be dynamic stats now between batters and pitchers. All of the historical batter-pitcher matchups in MLB between all the players that are currently in the game all have their batter versus pitcher matchups. So, if you're Ryan Braun going against, Steven Strasburg, and let's say Braun's, 1 for 5 in his career. Well, it's going to say your first game of franchise that, Braun's 1 for 5 in his career against Steven Strasburg, and that's going to update dynamically throughout your franchise. So, if you face Steven Strasburg 3 times in the year, that stat's going to update. In the last, one, it might say that Braun is, 2 for 10 now against Strasburg, or whatever it is. And I think that's amazing. That is probably one of the best features that I think a game has added, in that it gives you so much more depth, and it's something that you can track. And for guys like me who like to look at their teams and study their tendencies and see where they're at, I think it also gives you something else to say, okay, this guy is not very good against this pitcher. Maybe I'm going to sit him today for whatever reason. Maybe his contact's not as good. Maybe his vision's not as great, whatever. There's something that doesn't make him good against this pitcher, so I'm going to sit him and I'm going to start somebody else. And I think that's an amazing aspect, and that's a real-life aspect, and that's just something else that's making the show more realistic and engaging people in the franchise mode, and I think it's going to be a big win for them. It also adds to their commentary, because you can talk about stuff like that. And, I want to transition that into a little bit in things of what can Madden do to kind of take from that and use that in their games. And I think we saw this year with the dynamic commentary and the upgrades, they did a ton of upgrades for the weekly commentary, but it was still almost exclusively focused on online games. And it's I don't know the sales numbers, and I'd love to see them, or not the sales numbers, but the usage numbers. I'd love to see them and see what percentage of people are playing online versus franchise. Rex had said on the podcast earlier that franchise usage was up, I want to say, twofold, double the amount that it was before. I'd have to go back and listen to it, but it grew significantly this year. So if that many more people are playing franchise, you can't neglect them and say, well, we're only going to do commentary updates for online because, you know, it looks good when we're doing live play well, actually it doesn't even apply to their live broadcast because they have their own commentaries doing that. So it doesn't really make sense that they're even neglecting franchise. You know, it's all about, you know, online head-to-head and stuff like that, and they're going to add in these new stories, but none of them applies to franchise, and franchise is where you really want to engross people. I mean, definitely add some stuff to the regular game because obviously there's a lot of people that play that, and they shouldn't be ignored any more so than the franchise player should be ignored and not get constant improvements. And for some reason, that's the route that they went this year. And, you know, we didn't really get anything added or upgraded or fixed, you know, to a large degree with franchise outside of, you know, the initial patch, I think fixed some things. But after that, it was kind of like, we're done with franchise. Now, in fairness, I think some of that comes with the app. They had a ton of issues with the app, and I think it took way more than they thought. It took way longer than they thought, and I think that was a big thing that kind of held back franchise mode this year. Hopefully, they've got some things in place now that's not the case. If they freed up those resources that were working on the app and they can now dedicate that time to spending it on franchise mode, I think that's going to help us get a better franchise mode this year and hopefully get some, you know, if there are some bugs like we saw with stats and whatnot, that those things get fixed. We'll have to see. It does concern me a little bit though, because if you look at the way EA has gone, you know, they are so focused still on online MUT, salary cap, stuff like that, and they're kind of neglecting franchise. Now with the usage numbers that Rex pointed out, hopefully that's one of those things they can go and say, look, our usage numbers are up twofold over what they were last year. We got to keep giving these guys something or they're going to go away. And like it or not, there's a lot of people that come in, play franchise mode versus the CPU, and then they will try MUT or Draft Champions, and then they can potentially become a consumer that buys things from that and you add revenue. But if you cut those people out and say, well, we're only going to cater to you if you're an online player, well, you're cutting off your market base a little bit. And I know they've got tons of research stats that will say that, you know, that's where the focus is. But again, I think history teaches you lessons. And when you were selling 10 to 12 million copies, it was because you were focusing on CPU gameplay and franchise mode because that's really all there was. And I get that the recession came along and the economy changed and that 12 million units might not be realistic for Madden anymore, but I think 10 million is, and I think the only way you get there is to have a great franchise mode and a great CPU experience. And the one thing that really drives me crazy about the CPU experience is playing every team is pretty much the same. They all have different players. They all have their real life players, but they all pretty much run the same plays. You know, they have the playbooks a little bit different, but basically what they do is they draw off of the community suggestions, and those are the plays that the CPU runs, which makes no sense to me. You know, people that are playing the CPU are playing the CPU because they don't want to play a random guy online. So why do you link your playbook or in your play calls to the random guy online? You know, that just doesn't make any sense to me. They need to go in and rewrite that AI and say, okay, this is what this team would call. These are the plays they run mostly. And Anthony White, the guy that does the playbooks and is over a lot of these things, should have that data and can say, okay, these are going to be the plays they run most. And every team should be different. If I'm playing the Patriots, I want them to play like the Patriots. If I'm playing the Ravens, I want them to play like the Ravens. If I'm playing the Cowboys, I want them to play like the Cowboys. But what you see is you get in third and long, it's almost always four verts. It's one of two or three different plays on any kind of third down the entire game, no matter which team you play. And that's got to change. Now, going back to what transitioned us into that, what can franchise mode do like MLB is doing with these expanded stats and stuff like that? I don't know how difficult it would be to implement all of these. I'm imagining putting in something where, you know, you could say, well, Tom Brady has this kind of a record against this team and this is his stats. That would be pretty complex, and I don't know that that's the same kind of thing that you get with baseball. Baseball has always been one of those really stat-driven games, and so people that are baseball fans like those stats, and it's more of a one-on-one game. So I don't know if Madden can necessarily take that and implement it, but they can definitely take the idea of stats and expand upon it. And I think the groundwork's already there. And, they put in the game planning this year and they show you the top 4 plays or whatever, although they don't update, and maybe they have more. I haven't paid attention since early in the year, but we tested it out and we looked at a team. We simmed through some games and we looked at them, like week 2, and then they played the same team again in week 7, and the stats were the same. They never changed. So at one point they were placeholders. I've heard that they became updated, but they were only telling you what the team did on first down. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but I heard that online. Whatever the case is, they don't update, and they're not accurate, and they don't really do much for you. They don't tell you a whole lot, right? So that's the area that they can really expand upon, because in football, the game planning and the strategy of it is, I think, a bigger aspect of that game than it is with baseball. Baseball is a very much one-on-one. Obviously, there's strategy, and you want to know your hitters, and that's why they have like the hot and cold zones and stuff like that, try to figure out how you get them out. Well, this is that aspect for football. If you know the opponent that you're playing runs the ball, 65% of the time, and they run under center, 65% of the time, or they run from shotgun 60% of the time, or their favorite run play is inside zone from shotgun, or, stuff like that. If you have that data, now you can adjust to what you're doing and make a more effective game plan than especially what they had. And I think the groundwork's there for them to expand upon that. Like, again, I think that, or I hope that this year was mostly like, okay, we got the play the moments in, which was great, and now we see MLB borrowing from that. I wouldn't be surprised to see NBA implement that next year. That was great. I think it's a big feature, and I think that's definitely helped people be more engaged in franchise because they don't have to play a full game. I think that's good. I think they have the foundation there for these stats. Obviously, they're tracking these stats. I'm sure there's more there than what they showed us. So now, this year, let's really expand upon that. Let's really grow that and give us more depth to what we're doing. And if, I would like to see, run versus pass ratio. Obviously, I like to see, 3 wide and 4 wide sets versus 2 running back and 2 tight end sets. How much are they in, more of a spread look versus more of a pro set? How much is shotgun versus under center? I think, at least their top 4 most used plays throughout the season. I would really like to expand that and be able to click on it and get more information and actually have like their top 10 plays, because I think that's the biggest thing. If they're running, you can, sometimes you play guys, and we have guys in our league, which, I would think pretty much run the same plays every game, or at least their top 10 plays they're going to run every game, right? Well, if you know those top 10 plays, well, you can go in. It's already set up that you're playing against the other scheme when you go into free practice, which is great. I think that was a great idea. Now you can go in, if you have those stats, and say, all right, these are the 10 plays that he runs the most. I'm going to go sit here and I'm going to practice them, and I'm going to figure out what it looks like when he runs it, and then what I can do to hopefully take it away, and whether that's a base coverage or making an adjustment or having to be aware when you see it. Maybe you have to use your linebacker or safety to try to take something away that normally would be open. I think that would add a whole new element for franchise mode and really expand and take off. And I think that's something they really need to do. And I think it's there. I think the framework is there. Again, I hope we're going to get a lot more outside of the stats, which, the bones are there. So I think they're going to expand on it, hopefully. I think the other things that we can hopefully look for, and I try to be realistic about this. I know guys, you post stuff out on Twitter or whatnot, and people reply, and they want these really wild, like, one-off scenarios, and they're just like not realistic, right? I try to keep my expectations realistic. I don't know everything about the dev process. Honestly, I don't know a lot about it. I haven't been down there. I haven't seen how it all works yet, but I do know that things are more complicated than we think, and I can kind of watch what they've been doing and kind of project, okay, I think this is where they might go. And so the one thing that we got this year was the app. Now, it didn't work the way they wanted it to, and it took a while to come out, and it still wasn't fully functional. And for those that use Daddy Leagues, we're actually getting less function now than we had before when there was the website. However, one thing a lot of people screamed for was an app. And I'm guessing this year they're going to add more to it. And, what that entails, I don't know. I know a lot of people want the option to be able to draft away from their console. And the only way you're going to get that, more than likely, is through an app. You could probably do a website, but it's not going to be as functional as it would be on an app because a lot of people are on mobile. Well, if you're able to build that into an app and you allow them to draft, have whether they have a draft board or whether they just keep it the way it is and you have to cycle through positions. I think that's a possibility. I don't know that I'm 100% sure certain it's going to come this year, but there was a reason they switched to the app. There was a reason they listened and said, okay, everybody wants an app that they can use. Things like NBA have an app. We need an app. But what are we going to put in the app? It's got to be more than just exporting stats to Daddy Leagues, because it was better when they had the website and he can just pull all of that stuff directly from the website. So there's got to be something in there. So I'm really hopeful that they give us a way to the draft online. I'm not going to, pin any money on it and say, yeah, write it down, guarantee it's coming. I don't know. But that is one thing that I see from what they've done. That's a very high probability. Another thing that I think is very possible, and I think I remember them saying that they've worked on this, and anytime they say that they've worked on it and they weren't able to get it in, you can pretty much guarantee it's coming eventually, and that would be an actual draft board. It doesn't seem like that would be a terribly hard thing to do. Basically you're just allowing people to order the players that they want. The difference is most people aren't going to sit there and order 200 players. They're going to order 150 players or maybe 50 players. And the problem is they're also not going to order every position. So you have to build the AI to account for it and say, all right, if this guy's doing this board and he's only got 50 players on it, we have to assume that you don't want any of these other positions. And so until those top 50 players are gone, we're only going to draft from that. And then now we have to have the AI account for what you've already drafted and what you need and have it make decisions from there. I think that's one thing they really have to improve on, whether they have a draft order or not. I don't think you need an actual draft board if you just have smart AI that can look at a roster and say, okay, this is where we definitely need somebody right now. And then secondarily say, this is where we're kind of old and this guy's contract's up next year. This is where we might need to add somebody. I think if you're smarter about that, then I don't think a draft board's necessarily needed, because the CPU is going to make smart decisions for you and you don't have to spend your time rating guys. But I do think a draft board's a widely requested feature. So I think it's something that's probably going to come, and I feel pretty strongly it's coming this year. I don't know. I feel more strongly about that than I do drafting from the app, I'll be honest. But I'm not 100% sure. One thing I do feel pretty confident that we're going to get this year is custom draft classes. I think they were almost there last year, and they had the ability when they first launched it to be able to edit the draft classes right before the draft. And that's not the ideal scenario, because you want to be able to import a draft class when you start the franchise, or maybe in week 1 or 2 before you actually unveil these guys, and you want to have it pre-done so that guys can draft them or can scout them all throughout the season. I think they were working on that last year based on the fact that you could edit all the players and everything. I think that's coming. I think it just makes sense. And if out of the 3 options, the draft board, drafting from the app, and a custom draft class, if I was going to pick one that I think is coming, it would be the custom draft classes. It would be the ability for you to upload a custom draft class, and then all the guys in your league can actually scout these created players. It doesn't, however, eliminate the need to have better draft classes. That's one thing that's still kind of lacking. We actually went in and edited our first 2 draft classes and used real players. So we have, had a lot of real guys out there, and guys were actually using real scouting reports than versus the in-game. But problem is now, season 3 and now we're into season 4, well, there's just not enough out there. I don't want to go in there and spend my time after every draft recreating these guys that are freshmen that we don't really know about, or high school seniors. That's kind of a pain, especially in the middle of a season when you're wanting to keep going. Now, I think it's possible that people will go through and create those kind of draft classes. They might have 4 or 5 years of a draft class of real players, and I think that will be cool and people will use them. However, I still think you need to improve your draft class creation management, in that, our draft classes were so devoid of talent and they were kind of boring. By the time we got to the 3rd round, everybody's just kind of like, whatever, you're not really finding any stars. There's nothing surprising to you. It was just kind of monotonous. I mean, you could find some here and there, but really in the NFL, you can get starters through the 3rd round. Not every starter is going to, or every player drafted in the 3rd round is going to be a starter, but you can get talent. And then, in the 4th round, there's still some. There's a lot less starters. The 5th and 6th and 7th, yeah, you're not getting a lot, but every now and again you find that Tom Brady or that Terrell Davis or whatever. And so that should keep guys interested. Well, when you go through the 3rd, 4th round and you're not getting anything that's that great, well, by the 5th, 6th, 7th round, everybody's like, whatever, I'm checking out. I'm going to go, have a beer. I'm going to go spend time with the family, whatever. I'm not going to sit here and do this because there's nothing exciting happening. And so they got to find a way to recreate that and make that more exciting, on top of allowing everybody to have custom draft classes, which I think is going to really change the game, being able to put real college players, quote unquote, wink, wink, in the game, which I'm sure EA is very afraid of, considering everything that went on with the NCAA franchise and everything. And that would be the one thing that I would say, if it doesn't happen, that is why. However, everything's editable right now, so we already did it. Some other leagues out there have already done it. It only makes sense that they're going to do it. But I don't know. Who knows? EA is a publicly traded company. They're worried about their image and their possible lawsuits and profits and all that. And hopefully it's not the case. Hopefully they're like, hey, edit draft classes, and if there's people out there that are creating fake draft classes or whatever, I don't know. I don't know the legalities of it, but if there was one thing, not to be a buzzkill, that was going to keep it from happening, that would be it. However, the fact that you can edit everything about the players right now, and it doesn't seem like anybody's screaming, as long as EA isn't trying to replicate real life players, I don't think you can really hold them accountable to that and say that, hey, you guys were doing something. Other than that, I don't know. Those are the biggest things that I think that are wanted and people are really clamoring for. I do think that, I hope at least, and I think it's fairly possible that we get assistant coaches, like at least coordinators, offensive and defensive. I don't know. I mean, obviously you have to license them. If you just have generic ones, I don't know if that really plays the same role. Doesn't appeal to me as much. I'm sure it would to some, although if you can edit them, well, then we have something to work with. I think that's possible. I don't know what else. I mean, story mode, I don't know if I really or consider that a franchise mode, but I think it's pretty probable that a story mode is coming. Although the more I hear about NBA's franchise, I didn't get that, or story mode. I didn't get as far into it. I kind of lost interest after a while. So now I'm kind of, looking at MLB The Show with Road to the Show, who's kind of got more of a story to it. Like, I kind of want that experience. I don't necessarily need this big cinematic, theatrical experience of the single player and going through and making all these decisions and having all this, actors, voiceovers. I don't know if I need that. I want to be able to play the game, which is the most important part, and then have decisions that affect it. If I can have sponsorships and that gives me money and I can use that money to hire better trainers, or, maybe, a My Crib type thing like they used to have in NBA, and you can deck that out. You can do stuff with it. It actually makes worthwhile. If you can increase your popularity like a Tom Brady, and you can increase your value as possibly a Hall of Famer, like maybe you don't finish as great as somebody else, but people loved you, so maybe you get in there over, you see with T.O., who people don't really like, but he has the stats and he doesn't get any. If you could add some kind of theatrics like that, that would kind of make it somewhat interesting. The more I messed around with NBA, the more I heard about it, I don't know that we need that big storyline mode. It would be cool if you could add some college teams in there and you could play as college teams and you get drafted, and that would be kind of nice. But outside of that, I think the storyline could kind of get old after a while. I just want to play my games and, maybe do some practicing and, enhance my attributes and maybe have some off-field stuff that affects what I'm doing. And, we have some fun that way. We'll see what they do. I mean, they could go the way of FIFA and have a detailed story mode, or they could, start out more simplistically. Who knows? Since Frostbite's coming and we saw the model with FIFA, I have to suspect if they're going to do it, that's probably the route they're going to go. But, we'll have to wait and see. I think that's pretty safe to say that's coming, but, we'll have to wait and see on it. Overall, I think I'm pretty excited about this year of sports games. I think MLB is going to be good. I still don't like the catcher pausing the throw and the slow down. That feels too arcadey to me. I wish they would have done that better, but we'll see how it is when it's played out. Everything else that I've seen from the show definitely makes me excited about it. We don't know anything about Madden yet, but when you draw parallels to the things that they've done in the past and kind of the direction they're looking at, I think it's promising. I think with the app being out of the way and, more usage and franchise this year, they're going to dedicate more to it, which is super exciting. I can't wait to see, maybe they'll come up with some things that we hadn't thought about. So that's going to be exciting. NBA every year does some crazy things that really kind of wow you, so I'm sure they're going to do that again. NHL's progressed this year, and I'm sure they're going to take the next step. There's going to be another UFC game at some point this year, so that's exciting. So I think it's going to be a really great year of sports gaming, and I'm really excited about it. I can't wait to keep you guys up to date on everything that's going on. feel free to leave comments. Tell us what you think. What do you want in these sports games? What do you think's coming? What do you not think's coming that maybe you'd like to see that might be a little bit more difficult? Experiment, put some wild ideas out there. Let us know what you think in the comments if you're listening on YouTube. Obviously, if you're on the podcast on iTunes, we appreciate you listening. You can always check us out on YouTube. You can also tweet at us at PX1 Sports. So, definitely interested to hear everything that you guys have to say and what you guys want to see in your sports games. Hope you guys all have a great week, and we'll see you guys back here next week. Thank you for listening to another episode of the PX1 Sports Radio podcast. For more, you can find us on Twitter at PX1 Sports or online at px1sports.com. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.